Have you ever wondered if everything you've been told about how the world was created is really true? What if I told you there were divine beings living on earth long before Adam and Eve? Would you believe it? Or would it challenge everything you've learned in church, Bible studies, and Christian tradition? You're about to hear something that's been kept quiet for centuries. Content so powerful and mysterious that the church itself banned it and hid it from official scriptures. But now, the time has come for the truth to be revealed. Today, we're going to uncover one of the Bible's greatest spiritual mysteries, the true sons of God who lived on earth before creation. These beings aren't just metaphors or legends. They're mentioned in ancient texts, apocryphal writings, forgotten records, and even hidden Bible passages most people overlook. Did you know there are verses suggesting a creation before Adam? A spiritual reality before Eden where heavenly beings walked the earth with divine authority. Now, think about it. Why don't pastors teach this? Why do churches avoid talking about these sons of God? What's so dangerous, controversial, or revealing about this knowledge that it had to be erased from Christianity's official history? The answer lies in the origin of an invisible spiritual war that began long before humans existed. We're talking about angels, watchers, pre-adamic beings who had power, wisdom, and a direct connection to heaven, but who were cast out, rejected, and even condemned for breaking divine order. Are you ready to face a truth that could change how you understand the Bible? Because from now on, we'll reveal what was censored by religious councils, hidden behind Vatican doors, and kept from the people of God. You'll learn why these sons of God were seen as a threat. You'll discover why they lived on earth before humans, and what happened to them afterward. There's even evidence they're still here among us, acting in the unseen spiritual realm. Stay with me until the end, because these revelations could change everything you believe about the beginning of the world, heaven, angels, and the spiritual battle still ongoing today. If you've come here, it means you're already ready for the truth the church has hidden for centuries. Understanding this hidden truth isn't just curiosity. It's a spiritual calling. If you're here, it's because something inside you is waking up, maybe an ancient memory of your soul, or a whisper from the Spirit leading you beyond the veil. So, I want to hear from you. Do you believe these sons of God really existed before humans were created? Do you think the church has reasons for keeping this topic quiet? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters on this journey of revelation. If this message touched your heart, made you think, or awakened something new in you, please like the video now. This helps YouTube know this video is important and helps more people discover this forgotten truth. And don't forget to subscribe to the Oracle Wave. Hit the bell because I'll be sharing more secrets hidden for centuries that can transform your spiritual view. This is just the beginning. The next revelation will blow you away. You're here because something inside you knows there's more than what's been taught, preached, or explained by traditional churches. And that's no surprise. When we open the Bible to Genesis 6, we face a passage that challenges centuries of established teaching and invites those who listen carefully to see beyond the surface. It says, "When people began to multiply on the earth and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took wives from all they chose." Now stop and think. Who were these sons of God? Why does the Bible clearly separate them from the sons of men? And why have so many churches avoided talking about this? This isn't just a difference in theological views. It's one of the Bible's greatest spiritual mysteries, and one of the most threatening to religious systems that want to control everything. The term sons of God can't just mean humans because the Bible clearly distinguishes them from the sons of men. To understand this, we have to go beyond the usual story and explore books that were excluded, silenced, or forgotten, or worse, twisted. The The Book of Enoch is one of those texts the church has hidden throughout history, and not by accident. It tells in detail how heavenly angels called the Watchers left their home in heaven and came to earth. Captivated by human women, they married them and had children who were giants. The Nephilim, hybrids, who belonged neither to heaven nor earth. The consequences of this union were so serious that God is said to have sent the flood to cleanse the corrupted world. Now think about this. Why was this story left out of the Bible? Why was the Book of Enoch, once well known and cited by early church leaders, labeled apocryphal and banned from preaching? The answer is difficult but necessary. It reveals an ancient spiritual war that started long before Adam and still affects the spiritual world today. This war shows that the sons of God lived on earth before the official creation, and that their existence connects the original divine realm to our current reality. And this isn't just in Enoch. The book of Job gives more clues. Right in the first chapter, God holds a meeting in heaven, and the sons of God appear before him, Satan included. This shows the title was for celestial angels with authority and closeness to the Creator. In other words, the sons of God are spiritual beings created before the world began. But if they were created before humans, where were they? What did they do? And why did some come to earth? Here we step into sacred, and at the same time, forbidden territory. Admitting that spiritual beings were active on earth before humans were created challenges traditional beliefs about the divine timeline. And that's scary. It's scary because it pushes people out of their comfort zones, forces them to rethink their faith, and face the possibility that spiritual realities are more complex than churches often admit. These sons of God had specific roles in heaven. They were like spiritual princes, angels assigned to oversee regions, watch over civilizations, and keep cosmic order. But at some point in eternity, something changed. Some of them rebelled. Others, driven by desire and curiosity, chose to interfere with the earthly realm, and that caused devastating consequences. The rise of the Nephilim was just one sign of a deep spiritual corruption, a legacy that, according to some scholars, still echoes today. What's most striking is realizing this spiritual rebellion wasn't a one-time accident, but part of a much older story. Some ancient texts talk about a first earth, a world before ours, where these divine beings lived. A creation that was destroyed, leading to the formless void described in Genesis 1:2. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. What many don't know is that the Hebrew word translated as was can also mean became. In other words, the earth became without form and void, meaning something had been destroyed even before Adam was formed from dust. Do you see where this leads? The Bible gives us clues. Apocryphal texts fill in the missing pieces. When you put it all together, the picture becomes clearer and more unsettling. If there was a creation before ours where heavenly beings walked the earth, interacted with creation, and meddled with humanity, then our story didn't start in Eden. It began long before, at a time when angels moved between dimensions and the battle between light and darkness was raging in full force. But why has this been kept secret? Why haven't most Christians heard about this? Because when you realize there's a deeper spiritual reality, you become free. Free from religious control, free from imposed ignorance, free to seek God with open eyes and an awakened spirit. And that, for many leaders, is too risky. They'd rather you keep believing only what's repeated from the pulpit. That creation took 7 days, that angels are just kind messengers, that the spiritual world is distant, almost symbolic. But it's not. It's real, active, and deeply connected to our lives. The sons of God who lived on earth before creation aren't just a theological curiosity. They hold the key to understanding the spiritual war's origins, humanity's purpose, and secrets hidden for thousands of years. That's exactly why the church silenced this story. Because it forces us all to question, dig deeper, and awaken. Maybe you're here because you're ready. Maybe the Spirit is calling you to see what's always been in front of us, but covered by fear, control, and religion. Now that you know this, the big question is, what else is hidden? What else did the Bible want to reveal but was deliberately hidden for centuries? If you're starting to see beyond the surface, comment below. I want to see the whole truth. Type and declare. Have you heard of the sons of God in Genesis 6? Have you ever read the book of Enoch? Write in the comments, I am ready for revelation. This isn't just a comment. It's a sign to heaven that your soul is awake. Do you realize what this means? If there was a pre-Adam creation, then everything we've been taught about the beginning needs to be reconsidered. The story of the world doesn't start in Eden as many think. What most people call the beginning might actually be a restart, a second chapter of something much bigger, older, and deeper. And the Bible itself hints at this. But few want to look beyond the literal. Few have the courage to dig into the details, the silences, the spaces between verses where truths are hidden. Truths that would change how we see God, angels, the spiritual world, and even humanity's role. When we read Genesis 1:2, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, stop and think. How perfect can something be if by God's hand it started in darkness with an abyss hanging over everything? Ancient scholars and theologians say this phrase actually describes a creation that had been destroyed. That means the earth wasn't created without form and void. It became that way. And this small translation change changes everything. If the earth became chaos, it's because there was something before it. Something organized, something established, a divine plan, maybe even a spiritual civilization, a first creation where the sons of God already lived on earth in direct connection with the Most High. Imagine that. A world before ours, where angels governed dimensions, where God's glory filled everything and perfect order reigned. Until something happened that interrupted this plan and plunged everything into darkness. Some non-canonical accounts describe this event as a spiritual collapse, a heavenly rebellion where certain sons of God strayed from their purpose. They corrupted creation and brought destruction to what had been made. This rebellion was so intense, so violent, that God had to step in not just with punishment, but with a new creation, a fresh start, the Genesis we know. That's why right after mentioning the darkness, the Spirit of God is said to hover over the waters, not to create from scratch, but to restore and redeem what was lost. If this is true, and there's plenty of spiritual evidence that it is, then the plan of salvation doesn't start with Adam's sin. It starts with an earlier fall, a broken covenant in the spiritual realm. This completely changes how we understand human purpose. If humanity was created after a spiritual collapse, then our existence is part of a bigger mission, to restore what was lost, to witness God's justice, and to take part in a war that began long before time itself. Can you feel the weight of this? This isn't just theory. It's a rediscovery of a truth always in the scriptures, but ignored, silenced, and hidden. The Psalms also give us some clues. In Psalm 104, verse 5, it says, "You laid the foundations of the earth, that it should not be moved forever and ever." This shows there was a solid plan, an eternal purpose. And just after that, the verses talk about God covering the earth with the deep, almost as if to hide it. Why hide something perfect, Why involve creation with waters and darkness if everything God made is good? Many ancient rabbis taught that there were 7 worlds before ours, 7 attempts, 7 creations, 7 realms. Ours is said to be the final, chosen one, the place God put humanity to act as a balance between heaven and earth. Even early Christians debated the idea of earlier worlds, celestial civilizations, and interrupted divine plans. Jesus himself often spoke about something existing before the world was made. In John 17:24, he says, "Father, I want those you have given me to be with me where I am, so they can see my glory, the glory you gave me because you loved me before the world began." How can someone exist before the world if everything starts in Genesis? This love, this prior existence, is key to understanding that material creation was preceded by a higher, older spiritual reality. And again, we come back to the sons of God. If they were with God before the visible creation, they shared in that glory. They were there when the universe was founded. As Job 38:7 says, "When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy." Yes, they were there, aware and active. They didn't just watch creation, they celebrated it. This means the spiritual reality is much bigger and richer than what we've been taught about the sons of God. They were part of the universe's spiritual structure, but as we've seen, not all stayed faithful to the Creator. Some rebelled, others came down to earth. Many influenced what happened afterward in a negative way. That's why Genesis starts with darkness, the deep chaos, because there's a story that came before the one we know, and it connects to us, even if most don't realize it. In this context, human creation is part of a plan for redemption, a divine response to a spiritual fall that had already happened. That's why Jesus is called the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world, Revelation 13:8, because the cross wasn't a reaction to Adam's sin. It was planned beforehand. It was necessary to redeem not just humanity, but the entire spiritual structure damaged by the rebellion of some sons of God. This is where everything comes together. The Bible, apocryphal books, ancient texts, forgotten verses, all point to a much bigger story, a cosmic narrative of fall, judgment, redemption, and restoration. We aren't the center of creation. We're part of a great celestial plan. And when we realize that, everything changes. Our faith, our mission, our worldview. So now I want to ask you, have you ever thought about it this way? Ever wondered what was before Genesis? Ever felt something didn't quite add up in the official story? If so, comment below. Before Genesis, there was glory. Or just right, I want to understand what came before. Comments like these help this video reach more people who hunger for revelation and show that you're awake, seeking more than simple answers. When we talk about the sons of God, we face a question bigger than just theology. Who exactly were these mysterious beings who show up at key moments in the Bible? Were they angels in the usual sense? Or was there something deeper, older, and more sacred behind that title? Hebrew tradition gives us some answers. To ancient scholars, the sons of God weren't just spiritual beings who obeyed without question. They were heavenly beings with free will, specific roles, and authority over different parts of creation. Many ancient texts, including parts of the Book of Enoch, describe these sons of God as watchers, powerful beings assigned to watch over and protect humanity, keeping spiritual order between worlds. But what few people know, and even fewer dare to say, is that these watchers weren't like the angels we imagine with wings, white robes, and harps. They were glorious, awe-inspiring, even terrifying in their presence and majesty, described as flames, radiant, surrounded by light and authority. They had superior intelligence, control over the elements, and in some cases, knowledge of heavenly technology and spiritual sciences beyond our understanding. The term sons of God appears many times in the Bible and in sacred texts of ancient communities. In Hebrew, they're called Beni Elohim, literally sons of the gods, or sons of the Most High. That alone is important. If they're called children, it's because they come from the divine presence. They weren't created like humans. They weren't formed from dust. They were born of light, glory, and presence. And so their nature is beyond what we can imagine. The book of Enoch tells us about them. Enoch, who walked with God and was taken without dying, was said to be guided by these watchers to learn about the heavens, the gates, and the secrets behind creation. There he saw the rebellious angels, those who fell in love with human women and were locked away in eternal spiritual prisons. But before that, these angels or sons of God actively helped organize reality. They taught, healed, and protected. They guarded the boundary between the seen and unseen worlds. But then something changed. Some crossed the line. Not a simple mistake, but a direct rebellion against the Creator. They saw human beauty and, driven by desire, entered the physical world. They took on material form, interacted with humans, and had children. An illegal mix of eternal and mortal, producing giants with great size and knowledge but corrupted deep inside. This event shattered the harmony of the spiritual world and affected the whole creation. The earth groaned. The heavens went silent. And God had to act. In justice, but with pain. These sons of God weren't ordinary demons. They were beings of light who once stood before God's throne, who knew His glory. And they chose to rebel, making them more dangerous than any darkness we know. And here's a key point. Not all the sons of God fell. The Bible makes it clear that some of these beings stayed faithful. They're still active today. They still serve at the highest levels. They continue to protect and watch over us. The spiritual battle isn't just between demons and humans. It's a fight between spiritual realms. It's an ancient war where some sons stand with the light, while others have sided with darkness out of pride, desire, and rebellion. This truth can be shocking if you've only ever heard about angels as trumpet players or messengers announcing births. But here we're talking about eternal beings, heavenly races, superior spiritual intelligences who actively build and break down on divine levels here on earth. You might wonder, why don't churches teach this? Why are these details about the sons of God considered taboo or even heretical? The answer is uncomfortable but necessary. It pushes us out of our comfort zones and forces us to see faith not just as a set of rules, but as a complex, multidimensional spiritual war where every detail matters and where our role as humans also shifts. We're not just creatures seeking salvation. We're part of a cosmic conflict between loyalty and rebellion, between light and darkness, between the sons who stayed true and those who fell. Over the centuries, the church feared losing control of the masses. Leaders worried that revealing the true origins of these beings would push people to question traditional dogmas. So angels were reduced to decorative figures, and the sons of God were explained away as just righteous men from Seth's line. A neat explanation, but one that doesn't hold up when you dig into the original texts. But now you know the truth. You're facing a reality that goes beyond the walls of churches. The sons of God were more than messengers. They were eternal, powerful, conscious beings with free will and responsibility before God. Some fell, some remain, but all are part of a spiritual reality that still affects our lives, our struggles, and our destinies. And here's the most intriguing part. According to some ancient traditions, the fallen sons of God still work behind the scenes, manipulating events, influencing nations, interfering with the world's structures. The Bible talks about principalities and powers in the heavenly realms and dominant spirits over this dark world. These aren't just poetic terms, they're spiritual warnings. If this makes sense to you, if something inside you connects with this revelation, write in the comments, "I see the sons of God with new eyes." Or, to keep it simple, write, "They were not just angels." These phrases help this video reach others who, like you, feel there's more beneath the scriptures. And if everything you know about creation is just a reboot of something that existed long before humans walked the earth, what if this planet, apparently empty at the start of Genesis, was already home to spiritual beings with intelligence, purpose, and direct connection to God's throne? This is one of the most striking ideas when we piece together forgotten scripture fragments with rejected books and hidden traditions, which for centuries were deemed too dangerous for common audiences. Now you're about to see a new perspective, something traditional religion often avoids: the existence of a spiritual realm on earth before Adam was created. By carefully looking at biblical and apocryphal texts, we start to notice an intentional gap between the opening verses of Genesis, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth," and the following statement that the earth was without form and void. The text doesn't explain what happened in between. It's as if the Spirit quietly hints to those paying attention. There was something before, something not fully revealed in the canon, but leaving traces between the lines, in the Psalms, in Job, and especially in the stories of Enoch and other patriarchs who walked with God. This is exactly where Psalm 82 comes in. A powerful passage often overlooked in sermons, but opening a window into a parallel spiritual reality. It says, "God stands in the assembly of the gods. He judges among the gods." Look closely. God himself stands among other gods. At first, this language shocks, but we're not talking about pagan gods. These are created spiritual beings. The heavenly authorities, also called sons of the Most High, members of a divine council, a spiritual hierarchy that governed parts of creation and, according to the Psalm, failed in their duty. They didn't deliver justice. They didn't protect the weak. So God declares they will die like humans and fall like any ruler. This passage isn't just symbolic. It points straight to a spiritual government over the earth before humans, a realm of light and order that for some reason fell, leaving behind the chaos, darkness, and deep waters described at the start of Genesis. The sons of God, the celestial beings we've been exploring, didn't live only in heaven. Some had authority over parts of the earth. They watched over and protected, kept balance between dimensions, knew the gates between worlds, understood the energy sustaining creation, and interacted freely and powerfully with the physical world. But how was all this lost? The story passed down is that there was rest, a fall, a moment when some of these beings rebelled, others withdrew, and the rest witnessed the collapse of a perfect system. That's why the Spirit of God hovers over the waters at the start of human creation. Because before making something new, he had to restore what had been corrupted. This earth, this planet we walk on, was once the stage for spiritual battles, heavenly conflicts, and moments of glory, unseen by human eyes but never forgotten in the spiritual realm. Ancient rabbis knew this. Many mystical texts, including Jewish traditions, talk about worlds before ours and spiritual races living on earth before humans, though many modern theologians call these ideas esoteric. Scholars who understand the Bible know it can't be read literally alone. The Apostle Paul even said the letter kills, but the Spirit gives life. To truly understand creation, we must see with spiritual eyes, not just limited human logic. And this truth is powerful enough to frighten, because if we accept there was a spiritual realm on earth before Adam, then humanity's role in creation changes completely. We're not just dust-made creatures. At its core, we're called to take back a position that once belonged to others, a place of spiritual authority that needs to be restored. This helps explain why the enemy hates humanity so much, why temptations are so subtle, and why the spiritual battle is so intense. Because humans are meant to inherit a role once held by heavenly beings who fell. This ties directly into Jesus' words when he said he saw Satan fall from heaven like lightning. That fall wasn't just symbolic. It was real, spiritual, and it had consequences here on earth. Many scholars believe that this fall didn't happen only in the invisible realm, but deeply affected the physical world too. It's as if the earth itself absorbed the fallout from a war in heaven. The natural world was impacted by decisions made in the spiritual dimension, and when Adam was created, he was placed on this stage. A garden surrounded by trees, yes, but also by spiritual gateways, invisible forces, and a legacy of conflict that needed redemption. You start to see why the creation of man is so special. Why were we made in God's image and placed at the center of history? Because we were meant to fill the gap left by beings who failed. A mission to restore the connection between heaven and earth, spirit and matter, creator and creation. But for that, God needed you. With free will, conscience, and above all, a relationship with Him. And it's this relationship that the enemy has tried to destroy from the very beginning, because he knows the story that came before. He knows what's at stake. He knows that if humanity aligns with the divine realm, the corrupted system would be exposed and defeated. So since Eden, the enemy's strategy has been to deceive, confuse, distract, and blind us, so we won't realize who we really are and what's really going on around us. Maybe you're starting to see it now. Maybe as you hear these words, pieces you once thought were disconnected are coming together. Maybe you're understanding why your spirit always sensed there was something bigger behind the story of creation. Something lost, but now being restored. If this resonates with you, comment below, "I am part of the restoration," or "This earth has already been home to spiritual kings." These comments help this video reach others who also sense there's a hidden truth behind the veil of religion. And it was on this very stage, this earth marked by spiritual memories invisible to human eyes, that one of the oldest and most powerful conflicts ever began to unfold: the rebellion of the sons of God. This conflict didn't start with humans, but with the celestial beings who once walked in glory, surrounded by the light of the Most High. Beings who knew the secrets of creation, who had direct access to divine presence and authority over parts of reality. Yet even with all this, they chose rebellion. And that choice changed everything. The fall of these sons of God wasn't a simple mistake, as some try to soften it. It was a deliberate, bold, and deeply destructive act. A rebellion that shook every part of creation. Some of these beings, described in texts like the Book of Enoch, ranked among the highest spiritual authorities. They weren't demons at first. They were heavenly princes, watchers, guardians of cosmic secrets, holders of laws that still surpass our understanding today. But driven by desire, pride, curiosity, or ambition, they decided to come down, to interfere with physical creation, to cross into the limits of flesh, to cross the boundary between worlds. Most strikingly, the Bible doesn't hide this. In Genesis 6 it says, "The sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took wives from all they chose." This passage, often spiritualized or downplayed by traditional teachings, describes something real, literal, and with huge consequences. These heavenly beings left their spiritual realm and took human women, not as symbols or metaphors, but in a physical, literal way that had irreversible effects. The big question is why? Why would beings made in glory choose to unite with flesh? The answer may lie in the free will God gave every conscious creature. They had freedom, and with that came the temptation to experience things they weren't meant to. Maybe the desire to feel human sensations. Maybe the vanity of being worshipped as gods by humans. Or maybe, even deeper, an ancient plan to challenge the Creator's authority. A plan that involved corrupting creation, mixing bloodlines, and changing the course of humanity from the start. And to do that, they had to interfere directly with human nature. These beings didn't just come down. They taught forbidden knowledge. The Book of Enoch tells how they taught humanity warfare, magic, poisonous herbs, seduction, astrology, and spiritual manipulation. They gave humans access to things beyond their ability to handle, which sped up the earth's corruption. The world spiraled into violence, occultism, bloody rituals, a rebellion against all that was pure. This corruption is why God decreed the flood, not out of whim or anger, but as a necessary cleansing. It was time to purge the earth of a corrupt lineage, a spiritual influence that had grown uncontrollable. The sons of God involved in this were judged, locked away in eternal prisons reserved for the day of judgment. This is recorded in the letters of the Apostle Peter and Jude, which clearly mention angels who abandoned their proper place and are now held in darkness until judgment. These aren't myths. They're part of humanity's spiritual story that's been swept under the rug to avoid tough questions and to protect fragile religious systems. Because admitting these beings truly existed and interfered in human history means recognizing we live on a hidden battlefield and that spiritual conflicts still rage today. And leading this rebellion, the most infamous of all the fallen, is Lucifer, the light-bearer, created perfect in wisdom and beauty, but who exalted himself and wanted to be like God. Christian tradition connects this figure to Satan, the adversary and accuser, and although he's the most well-known face of the rebellion, he wasn't alone. There was a whole host of others who followed his lead, each with their own role, domain, and influence. Beings who still operate behind the scenes in society, politics, culture, and religion. And don't think this was just in the past. The Bible makes it clear that our struggle isn't against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, rulers of this dark world, and spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly realms. In other words, this rebellion is still going on. The fall of some of the sons of God set a precedent, creating a wound between heaven and earth. Since then, humanity has been caught between the divine and the temptations of beings who know human weakness better than anyone else. What's truly alarming is that many of these beings weren't locked up. Some are still free, disguised, influencing events by manipulating hearts, whispering lies disguised as truth. They know their time is running out. They know God's plan to restore everything is already underway. So they're stepping up their game, their war, their interference. They still do everything they can to stop humanity from discovering its true origin, its spiritual identity, and its eternal destiny. And now, you're starting to understand all of this. You're connecting the dots. You're realizing this war isn't against you. It's for you, because you carry something they lost, the image of the Creator, the divine breath, the ability to return to the presence they abandoned. They know it. They fear it. That's why every generation they try to keep this truth from reaching people's hearts. But now it's come to you, and what you do with it is up to you. Before the next part of this revelation, I want you to tell me something in the comments. Do you believe some of the sons of God are still active today? Write, "The rebellion continues." Or, "I see the spiritual war." These aren't just comments. They're spiritual declarations. signs that you're waking up to something bigger. And now that you're beginning to grasp the depth of this invisible war, the origin of the fallen beings, and the spiritual reality around us since time immemorial, you might wonder why this truth has never been clearly shared in churches, sermons, or studies. It's not just negligence or ignorance. The truth is more uncomfortable than that. It's about control, fear, power, and spiritual censorship. Religious leaders have, throughout history, made deliberate, strategic decisions to hide certain truths from the public. One clear example is the Book of Enoch, a fascinating and unsettling text about the sons of God, the Watchers, and the spiritual reality before mankind. This book talks about dimensional portals, heavenly journeys, divine judgments, and especially the fall of angels who abandoned their heavenly homes to get involved with humanity. This book was widely known in ancient times. It was read by Jews, respected by many rabbis, and even directly quoted by New Testament writers. For instance, the Epistle of Jude clearly references a prophecy attributed to Enoch. Yet, this book was removed, silenced, and labeled apocryphal by the very leaders who decided which texts were inspired and which were not. And here's a point few dare to bring up. Who decided what was inspired? Who chose which books made it into the biblical canon and which were forgotten? These leaders were not prophets. They were men with their own interests, politics, fears, and desire for power. During major church councils, like the Council of Nicaea and others that followed, there were heated debates about which texts would be accepted, including ones that talked about wars in heaven, spiritual civilizations, angels crossing into the flesh, and invisible authority structures. These texts were deemed too dangerous because they shifted control from religious institutions back to individuals. The exclusion of the Book of Enoch was just the start. Many other writings were censored. Books about the Nephilim, pre-adamic creation, spiritual portals between heaven and earth, the celestial hierarchy, and the activities of fallen angels among humans. These were labeled heretical, fanciful, or uninspired, even though entire communities once respected and studied them. What few know is that in some parts of Africa and the East, these books were never discarded. They've been preserved and studied, because there, the fear of truth didn't outweigh the desire to understand it. But in the West, it was different. Over centuries, the Roman Church exercised tight control over faith, theology, and what could be taught. Any idea that challenged the official story, that humanity was the first creation and Eden was the starting point, was systematically eliminated. Along with it, teachings about the sons of God, the spiritual wars that came before mankind, and the celestial realms that once ruled the earth, all replaced by a simplified linear theology and faith that fit institutional agendas. Easier to control, easier to indoctrinate. Here's the key. When knowledge is controlled, faith becomes manipulable. When the deepest truths are hidden, people stay ignorant of their true spiritual identity. If you realize there's a spiritual war happening, if you see that spiritual beings still work behind the scenes of the world, if you understand your soul is at the center of a cosmic battle, you'll become more aware, more watchful, more awake. And a person who is awake is exactly what religious systems don't want. They want obedient followers, not awakened souls. They want spectators, not heroes. That's why the Book of Enoch and many other texts have been hidden for so long. And don't think this censorship was only about spirituality. It was also driven by political agendas, economic interests, and cultural control. To control what people believe is to control their choices, emotions, fears, and dreams. For centuries, keeping spiritual mysteries from the masses ensured power stayed in the hands of a few. How many secrets do you think are locked away in the Vatican archives? How many relics? How many manuscripts and texts sealed away with multiple layers of security? You might call this conspiracy theory, but if you look closely, you'll see it's just logical. The Church, which claims to guard the truth, is exactly the institution that fears certain books. Why don't they teach us about the Book of Enoch? Why do they avoid going into detail about the fallen angels? Why do they skip over the Nephilim, the spiritual civilizations that came before humanity, and the ongoing battle between light and darkness? The answer is simple. These truths empower our spirit, free us from blind faith, and guide us on a living, conscious, transformative spiritual journey. They help us realize that the physical world is just a surface layer of a much bigger reality. They reveal that our true enemy isn't flesh and blood, but spiritual forces trying to erase our divine identity. Now that you know this, now that you've heard this part of the story so many have tried to hide, you get to decide what to do with it. But before you move on, I invite you to leave a comment below with a phrase that shows you're awake. The truth was hidden, but now I see. Or, if you prefer, write, I want to know everything they kept from us. Saying these words not only helps others connect with this message, but also shows you're ready to dive even deeper into this ocean of revelations. Now that you understand there was a heavenly rebellion, that the sons of God directly interfered with creation, that some were imprisoned while others stayed active in the shadows, a big question comes up. Are these fallen beings still here? The watchers who corrupted the earth with their twisted wisdom. Have they come back? Or did they ever really leave? This is where things get even more unsettling. When we look at today's world, the global events, the rapid technological advances, the spiritual coldness spreading like a shadow across people's hearts, we start to see signs that something very ancient is returning. Certain spiritual influences once thought inactive are more active than ever, wearing new masks, speaking new languages, using new strategies, but with the same goal as always: to keep humanity away from the light, to twist the truth, confuse minds, and above all, to deny the existence of the spiritual realm. Have you noticed how moral values seem completely flipped right before our eyes? How what used to be right is now called wrong and even praised. How the sacred is mocked while the profane is accepted as normal. This doesn't happen by accident. There's an unseen force at work in society, and it's not political or ideological. It's spiritual. It comes from beings with thousands of years of knowledge about human behavior, beings who have studied our emotions, desires, and fears since the beginning of time. These beings haven't died or disappeared. They still pull the strings behind the scenes. Ancient texts tell us that after the fall, some were locked away in spiritual prisons, while others stayed active, just not openly. They stopped acting visibly and started working in subtle ways, through ideologies, inner voices, and modern beliefs disguised as enlightenment. That's why they keep shaping cultures, inspiring art, influencing entire systems, always behind the curtain but very active in the spiritual realm. That's why we see the rise of occult practices disguised as modern spirituality. That's why so many seek contact with so-called beings of light without knowing who they really are. That's why behind movies, songs, books, social movements, and even some religions, there's a pattern of rejecting biblical truth and promoting alternative knowledge. A repackaging of the same corrupt wisdom of the fallen angels. That same wisdom that threw the world into chaos back in Noah's time. Speaking of Noah, have you ever stopped to consider what Jesus said about the last days? Just as it was in the days of Noah, so will the coming of the Son of Man be. Things were just as extraordinary, or just as dark back then. Mixing of bloodlines, the presence of the Nephilim, moral decay, growing violence, spiritual corruption caused by the union of the sons of God with human women. Jesus didn't pick that example randomly. He was pointing to a spiritual cycle repeating itself, a return of an ancient pattern, now on a far bigger, more complex global scale. All this leads us to believe these beings are still here, not necessarily in physical bodies like before, but definitely active in the invisible realm. Maybe through people in power, influencing decisions that pull crowds away from the light, or even showing up in experiences some interpret as encounters with aliens or other dimensional beings, when in reality they are the same ancient spiritual rebels now wearing new faces. The Bible talks about this too. Paul warns about angels pretending to be messengers of righteousness, about teachings from demons, about the falling away in the last days. Revelation clearly mentions spiritual beings controlling whole nations, called principalities and territorial spirits. This shows that the spiritual war never ended. It just changed form. It became more subtle, more psychological, more symbolic. But it's the same war that started when the sons of God challenged God's order. This is why spiritual discernment is so important today, because many are being deceived. Many are drawn to new truths and liberating knowledge that deep down echo that old rebellion. It's the same temptation that fooled Eve. You will be like God. The same offer of spiritual independence without submitting to the Creator. The same lure toward wisdom without repentance, power without holiness, enlightenment without the cross. Maybe now you're starting to connect the dots. Maybe you're beginning to see that what once seemed just symbolic is actually very real. That these beings, these fallen sons of God, not only exist, but are still active, working patiently and intelligently, waiting for every chance to trap an entire generation in their spiritual web. That's why we need to talk about this. That's why this message needs to be shared with more people. While many stay numb from entertainment, distractions, and false teachings, the spiritual battle is heating up. And those without trained spiritual eyes, those who can't read the signs of the times, become easy targets. You need to wake up. You have to understand that this war is still going on, that the fallen spiritual beings aren't just figures from the past. They are active, aware, and strategic forces still shaping the world's story. And you, here listening now, are proof that your spirit is waking up, called to look beyond the surface and realize that everything the church has hidden, the books have kept quiet about, and the systems have ignored is now being revealed clearly and urgently, because the time is right. If this message is stirring something deep inside you, type in the comments, "I see the signs of the days of Noah," or if you want, just write, "They are still among us." That shows you're awake, and also helps this video reach others who need to hear this. If you're here, it's because your spirit is searching for something more, something most people still don't see. That puts you among the few waking up to the deepest, most hidden truths of life. Before you go, subscribe to the Oracle Wave channel. This journey is just getting started, and the next videos will bring even more powerful revelations that might change how you see everything. Also, if this content moved you in any way, hit the like button. This tells YouTube this message needs to reach more people and helps this spiritual movement grow. And one special request, comment below with the phrase, "I reached the end because I want to know the truth." This lets me know you're with me on this path and helps build a community of awakened, conscious people. Don't go away just yet. The next video is right here on the screen, and in it, we'll dive deeper into everything you just heard. Click on it and keep going with me on this journey of spiritual awakening and revelation. I'll see you there.